Good morning, members. We've passed the appointed time, and we've got the quorum. There are 3 items on the agenda proposed by the government. These are funding applications, and they were on the agenda of the last meeting, but were not scrutinized. I would like to remind members that if members have a direct or indirect pecuniary interest on the matters discussed, please, based on Rules 83.8 of the Rules of Procedure, disclose the nature of that interest before you speak. And I would like to bring members' attention to the ROP 84 on the requirements on voting in relation to direct pecuniary interest of members. So let's move on to Item 1, Head 711, Housing, paper number PWSC 2014-1554, and that has to do with the upgrading of AT1TI to Category A, and that has to do with the public transport interchange and associated works at Kiu Cheong Road East, Shan, and the estimated cost is 602.2 million in money of the day prices. And on the 3rd of November 2014, the administration has consulted the housing panel and the members support in principle the proposal, and the gist of this discussion has been tabled. Attending the meeting for this agenda item are the following officials from the Transport and Housing Bureau, Highways Department, Housing Department, and Transport Department. So perhaps I'd like to ask Mr. Lo Kwok Kong, Chief Civil Engineer from the THB, to take us through the item. I would like to seek member support to for this item to upgrade 81T1 to Category 8. I would briefly introduce the item, and the details are set out in the paper. And we would like to provide a public transport interchange to support the new home ownership scheme development at Kiu Cheong Road East. This is an HOS development, and it will provide 2,400 units. And the scope of works includes demolition of 2 existing PTIs and the construction of a new PTI and construction of a footbridge across Ping Ha Road. We consulted the housing panel in November 2014, and members support the proposal. And the estimated cost is $602.2 million, and we hope to get member support, and the funding approval can be given as soon as possible. We want to commence works as soonest, and we want to provide the infrastructure works to tie in with the HOS development. Thank you. The first member to raise the question is Dr. Kwakaki. Chairman, I won't object to this item, but I would like to ask that this project falls within the HOS development area. When we look at the diagram, it is quite near to the residential development. Have you considered the impact on the future HOS development project? Will noise and nuisance be created? Are there any measures to safeguard the interest of the residents in this HOS scheme? HOS development project. There will not be any superstructures above the PTI, right? Yes. We know that we lack land to build public housing, and the property developers are very intelligent. For example, in the Vert D and also Hoi Ming Hien development in Hong Kong, and in all of these development projects, buildings are built above the PTI, even some even having 70 stories. So how come that the government is not putting good use to the PTI? Why don't you consider building PRH flats for people who may have to wait for 10 years to get a PRH flat. The recurrent expenditure every year is $5 million. How come that the sum is so huge? Mr. Low? Thank you, Chairman. I thank the member for his concerns. I think they are very valid. We have conducted an EIA for this HOS. Will it be impacted upon by facilities nearby? And we would consider mitigation measures to minimize the environmental impact. In terms of the noise, Pingha Road and other roads will create traffic noise. And in our design, we have built-in measures like soundproof walls and so on to safeguard residents' interest. And we have made an assessment of the PTI according to Hong Kong planning standards and guidelines. The noise creator, the noise sources will be situated away from the receivers, the noise-sensitive receivers. So they will be located far away. And we plan to build a cover for the PTI to cut down on the noise so that it will not directly affect the residents. And in the cover, we will build in the sound insulation materials, also to reduce noise created by buses. With regard to development of the PTI, well, the PTI and the HOS make up an integrated development project, and we should take an overall, well, we should look at the bigger picture. We have consulted the district council and also the residents, and they have raised the suggestion that, say, retail facilities in a wet market can also be provided, and some residents strongly said that say that there should be good visual view, and then there should be a 30-meter. Well, in our design, there would be a 30 meters visual corridor, so it would be a low structure, low-rise structure. Well, he hasn't answered my question. Is there anyone from the planning department who can take the question? Why don't you're wasting away the land? And residents have asked for a wet market, and ultimately you have disregarded their suggestion. Well, he mentioned about the visual corridor. Apart from the visual corridor, the space there, is there anywhere else that you can build in the wet market? The development bureau? Permanent Secretary, as a colleague said, this is an comprehensive development project, and the PTI and the HOS make up an integrated whole. The plot ratio, it now is 5, and this is considered to be a high-density development. So for this site, we have actually maximized the plot ratio in building the HOS. And in terms of the layout, the HOS development is put on one side, and the low-rise structure is put on the other side. So that can help enhance the visual impact and cut down on noise. So in terms of the use of the land, I think we have maximized the use of the plot ratio. Next one, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. We won't have any objection to this PTI project. But then the same problem remains here. The Permanent Secretary said that the plot ratio has all been they have maximized the use of the plot ratio. But what about the other community facilities? The district council's suggestion about the wet market and also welfare facilities, and can they be included in this project and in this site? Can you build 1 to 2 extra floors for housing the welfare facilities? Has the SW told you that they don't need such space to provide welfare facilities for Yuen Long residents?
So we would like to know the details of that study back then. We understand that the PTI is at grade, and on top a cover would be built. I believe that's a waste of resources. Chief Engineer, for this HOS development, we do give consideration to these factors. The HOS observes the Hong Kong PSG in the provision of leisure and transport facilities like open space, retail outlets, wet market, and so forth. And in the vicinity, there's this Tin Shui Wai cultural complex with libraries, sports facilities, and swimming pools for the use of the residents. Is it that the other government departments do not consider that it is necessary to make use of this site to provide welfare facilities that are so lacking in Yuen Long? Can the Chief Engineer answer this question? Please tell us. Mr. Chairman, here I don't have the information about Yuen Long District. Any other public officer who can answer Mr. Wu Chi-wai's question? Mr. Chairman, concerning the community facilities and their planning, I don't have the information here, but this is a CDA, so when we plan for a CDA, in general, we'll observe the Hong Kong PSG in the calculation of community facilities in the area. If there's a shortage, we'll try to provide the necessary facilities. I believe in the planning process this has been done. Our colleagues mention community facilities provided in the area. Mr. Chairman, of course, I understand that for community facilities we have to follow the Hong Kong PSG, but what about welfare facilities? Well, maybe you should tell us more about the planning of the CDA. If welfare departments would like to use the site in this CDA, they will have a chance to air their views. I'd like to thank Mr. Wu for his question. In fact, I did mean that welfare facilities will be included in the community facilities. In general, for a CDA, will circulate the project to relevant departments. If there's any need for GIC facilities, the department concerned will consider all those factors during the planning process. So welfare facilities will be considered at a certain stage, right? Which stage? Well, usually for a CDA, they have to submit a master layout plan for the approval and vetting of the Town Planning Board. And the details have to be circulated among departments. For this particular site, I don't have the information about the circular, but that principle applies to all CDAs. Yes, I just want to know the general approach. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, any follow-up? I'd like the government to respond to a piece of opinion from the District Council, which considers it necessary to have a wet market. Is there a wet market in the vicinity? Mr. Chairman, the wet market will be provided in the HOS. Shops will also be provided apart from the wet market. Next, Mr. Tony Tse. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, in principle, I'll support the project. But I'd like to ask about the $600 million. Some sums of money are for the footbridge crossing Ping Ha Road. I think we're all very concerned about the design of the footbridge. I understand that the government has spent a great deal of effort on that. May I ask this? Well, usually you consider how to make use of the cover of a footbridge, right? Take, for example, we'll do greening on the podium of a building. So what about the cover of this footbridge? Will you consider that when you design the bridge? And apart from illumination and ventilation, you should also consider using certain space to display government advertisements, or even for the display of lists of award-winning schools in competitions. So apart from illumination and ventilation, will you give consideration to the other factors of design? I'd also like to ask about paragraph 8C, and D and E involve parking facilities for bicycles. How many bicycles can be accommodated? And in future, who will be managing the parking of bicycles? Chief Engineer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the honorable member's question. As for the cost of the footbridge, well, this footbridge is very long, 140 meters in total, spanning this very wide Ping Ha Road. As it crosses from one side to the other side of Ping Ha Road, then development plus loading will impact on the design of the bridge. The bridge will be more heavyweight, so to speak, and the construction cost will also be higher. Can we display exhibits on the footbridge? Well, after the completion of the footbridge, we have to liaise with the Highways Department in relation to the management of the bridge. Ventilation and illumination, as well as pedestrians, are not affected. We can consider displaying temporary exhibits on the bridge. What about bicycles? Parking spaces for bicycles? I'll defer to the Housing Department. Housing Department, who will answer this? Mr. Chu Chulang, Chief Civil Engineer of the Housing Department. Mr. Chairman, we plan for 30 parking spaces for the bicycles. So much for the time being. Mr. Jie, well, Mr. Chairman, I did note that the footbridge is very long. As regards additional loading, we of course have to consider that factor. But will it be a very large additional loading? I don't think that's a reason for rejecting the idea on the whole. Mr. Chairman, very often footbridges are not designed in such a way as to please the public, so we would like to have better design. I think the government's answers just now are rather negative. As regards bicycles, they've given us the number of parking spaces. But if you're talking about 3 million odd If you can just accommodate 30 bicycles, well, the sum of money is not small. And if nobody is to pay attention to these parking spaces for bicycles, the money will be wasted. And I'm worried that the facility will not be managed by anybody. So I'm concerned about management, parking of bicycles, etc. In addition, for this footbridge, you have to consider possible exhibits on the footbridge at the stage of design. Well, very often you don't think about all these at the beginning very seriously. So why don't you take this factor up at the stage of design? I have the same feeling. Chief Engineer, when you provided the answer to Mr. Jay, you must understand Mr. Jay's demand. He wants to have something unusual on something usual. Well, you said that greening, exhibits, etc. will add to the loading of the bridge. Of course, but to what extent? You're talking about $600 million. Chief Engineer? Mr. Chairman, I'd like to clarify the honourable member's question. Was he referring to greening on the cover of the footbridge or other developments? Well, I don't know what adjectives Mr. Dare will use, but we understand that this is a rather commonplace and old-fashioned footbridge in terms of design. So Mr. Dare was asking whether you can add something uncommon or special on this very commonplace footbridge. For example, can you have exhibits on the footbridge in future? Just now you were saying that that would be difficult because even greening would add to costs, and exhibits should be something for the Highways Department later, after the footbridge is completed. But after the bridge is completed, your hands may be tied if you want to display exhibits. Well, we don't think exhibits will cause the bridge to collapse. Well, Mr. Chairman, you're referring to developments on top of the bridge. I thought you were talking about housing units. Oh, no. Well, if it is just greening, there shouldn't be any major problem. As for the design, these drawings attached to the paper are just conceptual drawings. We consulted the archivist and have accepted and have received their approval before we came here to seek members' approval. Well, maybe I'll use the term enhancement that the government so often uses. Can you give us the detailed design? Yes, when? Well, before commencement of the project. What about the bicycles? Well, this is a public facility, so in future the transport department will oversee the cycle tracks, etc. Well, we're behind schedule. Well, you have not said anything about value for money, these parking spaces for bicycles, future management, etc. Next member, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. Mr. Chairman, I heard the chief engineer say that there will be a wet market in the future HOS development. Is that correct? Yes, right? Yes. I attended that meeting. Some colleagues supported your funding proposal. Well, how large is that wet market? Do you know the size of that market? 40 stores planned for the moment. Well, I'm not the district councillor of that constituency. Is he here? No? Oh, very unfortunate. Oh, we have one from New Territories West. On that day, it's said that as you're spending $600 million on this PTI is rather expensive. And you move 7,700 people in. That's why you're going to dismantle the old PTI and build a new one. $600 million is not a small sum. Yuen Long District Council was of the view that for this wet market in the HOS development, it may not be large enough to cope with demand.
And they said that they hope that other Yuen Long residents can also benefit from this project. So how will you respond to this demand? Chief Engineer. Thank you, Chairman. 40 stores. Well, actually, we've consulted the District Council on that, and they accept this figure. As for the other facilities, I'll defer to Mr. Wong, the Chief Architect from the Housing Department, to give us more information. Mr. Wong Mong-wen, Chief Architect. Thank you, Chairman. With regard to the wet market and the Yuen Long District Council's request, we consulted several times the Yuen Long District Council in 2013 and 14. The District Council wanted very much to have a wet market and also cooked food stores within this development project. So in our final design, we have responded to their request, and within the HOS development, 40 stores will be provided in a wet market. There will be a shopping center with shops and fast food outlets and so on. And the Yuen Long District Council has accepted our latest proposal. So you said that the District Council has totally accepted your proposal. Is that right? They haven't asked us for any follow-up. Well, that's not what I heard from that last meeting. Well, I've asked this question on their behalf. So whatever happens afterwards, you can't hold me liable. You said that this is a community of 7,700 people and 40 food stores are enough. And we are spending a huge sum on a very large PTI. Now, you said that 40 stores are enough. So I would not take any responsibility if any problems arise in the future. Second, should there be any facilities? I'll leave my question to the next round. Next one, Dr. Kwok Ka-ki. Chairman, going back to my earlier question, of course I understand that there are certain planning perimeters, but we have to understand that Hong Kong faces a very serious problem, housing problem, and also issues with welfare facilities. Actually, every year, thousands of elderly people die or pass away while waiting for an RCHE place. And in Yuen Long and Tuen Mun, so many elderly are waiting for an RCHE place. And in Tuen Mun Hospital, many patients can't be discharged because they cannot be relocated to an elderly home. So this is a very real problem. I don't think there is any coordination among different government departments. They should give us a paper on whether they have asked the SWT and other NGOs for whether they need welfare facilities and whether they have maximized the use of this plot. We are as keen as you are in maximizing the land use. Well, they talked about the visual impact. Well, I get infuriated. In the Eastern District, there is this pencil-like building, which is going to be a hotel. That is a very small plot, and it creates adverse visual impact to the neighborhood. And the government tries to force the proposal through the town planning board. Well, the SWD doesn't have any representative here, but they've told us that for elderly homes, they have to be low rises because of safety and fire risk concerns. So we are waiting the land resources here. So many elderly in Yuen Long and Tin Shui Wai are waiting for an elderly home place, and we are letting this opportunity pass by. I think the government is negligent in its duties. And also, I've asked the question about the $5 million recurrent expenditure. He hasn't answered my question. Mr. Chan, you've heard the members' views. Mr. Wu Chi-wai and Dr. Kwok Ka-kay would like to learn about the design process in coming up with the master design plan, whether any potential users, including the SWD, have been consulted. Can you give us a paper later on to tell us at which stage were they given a chance to express their aspirations for the use of land? Can you do that to respond to the two members' concerns? Thank you, Chairman. This is an HOS development project, and the Housing Department colleague perhaps can deal with that. Mr. Wong Mong Wan, Chief Architect, can you undertake to the PWSC that before the proposal is forwarded to the FC, provide that information? Yes, we can do that. Who can take the question on the $5 million expenditure? And also, can I defer to Mr. Chu from the Housing Department to answer the question? Mr. Chu Chi-lang, Chief Civil Engineer. The $5 million, this is for the recurrent expenditure of the Highways Department and the LCSD. And I'm asking what exactly will it be spent on? Can you give us more details? Is it on the electricity tariff? What kind of expenditures items? Can I ask the Highways Department colleague to supplement? Who from the Highways Department? Mr. Yao Quan Wai. Thank you. There are two parts to the recurrent expenditure. One part is Highways Department, and the other part has to do with the LCSD. I can only talk about the Highways Department. Recurrent repair, operation expenses, management and operation expenses, and electricity tariffs. First, for the cover, we have lights on the footbridge. There are lights, a lift. So electricity fee and repair costs have to be incurred. For the PTI, the road service, routine inspections. If there is damage, we would do maintenance and repair. And the cover of the PTI is also a sort of structure. And if there is damage found, then repair works have to be carried out. So much of the expenditure has to do with electricity on lift and lighting. We are very concerned about saving of electricity. Are there many measures to save electricity? And second, before the proposal is taken to the FC, can they give us more details? He's just talked about the Highways Department, but we're lacking information from LCSD. Can they give us further information? Energy conservation facilities or measures. Any information on that? Thank you, member, for your question. With regard to the lighting, we are using energy-saving lights or lamps, and perhaps we can give you the details later on in a paper. But what about the LCSD? Can you help ask the LCSD to give us the information, or can Mr. Lo Kwok Kong convey our request to the LCSD? Perhaps I can give you some information with regard to the LCSD. $5 million, two parts, Highways Department and LCSD, and actually the majority of it has to do with the electricity tariffs and repair works on the PTI and the footbridge. And the LCSD takes up only $1 million, including daily cleaning work, garbage handling, and so on. These are routine works to be carried out by the LCSD. So please show some respect to the Council and give us more details before you go to the FC. Mr. Law, can you coordinate and give us more details on this $5 million? Can you do that? Next one, the first round, Mr. Chen, Albert Chen. Chairman, I looked at the design here and the diagram, and it looks better compared to other PTIs. I hope that our design can catch up with the international design standards. In urban design in Hong Kong as a whole, I think we are not doing a particularly good job, and we are lagging behind some other international cities in the world. So in the final design, can you do minor adjustments to further improve the aesthetics of the design? Maybe it will not have a great impact on the cost. I would like to ask a question about the park for bicycles in Tin Shui Wai, Yuen Long Tong Chung, and Shangshui. And well, they are very suited, and the areas are very suited for people to bicycle for a short distance, and the cycle parking area is in acute shortage. And the cyclists are vying for parking spaces. So for the design of this PTI, you said that there will be a cycle parking area. How many parking spaces will there be? 30 parking spaces. He's already answered that question. 30? Just 30? Wow, don't call it a parking area then. Well, even if you have 300 or even 1,000 parking spaces, that won't be enough if you're talking about a big PTI. Can you just, can you do a better job? Not a perfunctory job? Well, the government officials have their own private vehicles, and for the ordinary members of the public, they may have a bicycle, and they use it as a transport means very often. Are you assuming that only 30 people will, 30 cyclists will go to this PTI and use it and interchange there? So who will further answer the question on the parking area? Well, if it is just 30 parking spaces, well, we will not endorse this paper. Transport Department, it's your turn to say something. Mr. Poon Chi Man. Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Chan, for your questions. Based on our design, the 30 parking spaces are planned based on the design of the PTI. And actually, around the PTI, there are other parking areas. And in March 2014, we attended the Yuen Long DC meeting. We learned that the supply outstripped demand with regard to parking spaces. So actually, we reduced the number of some parking spaces, and on the 25th of April 2014, we gazetted for the reduction of some parking spaces for bicycles. Well, what I can say is that there are other parking areas nearby. Can you tell us how many are there nearby? How far are they from the PTI? Do you have the specific distance? Within 50 meters? Beyond 1 kilometer or what? Well, definitely not beyond 1 kilometer. How many parking spaces altogether? Well, hundreds, I believe.
Ms. Emily Lau. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our colleagues raised a number of issues which I think the government should consider. First of all, you should make full use or good use of space, because we lack certain facilities. Well, if you have a fire station here, you cannot build anything on top of it. But now, this is not the case. I think government departments should adopt a broader approach in their thinking. So you should consider whether or not you can put more facilities on this site. As for the market, I hope that that will be sufficient. We had a case conference on Lohas Park. It has a population of tens of thousands of people with no market. That's a basic need. People have to travel to other districts to buy food and commodities. Well, we support the idea of having more parking spaces for bicycles, because we encourage people to cycle. 30 is just too small a number. And then may I refer you to enclosure 2. Well, we always ask whether or not you can have seats at bus termini or bus stops. In overseas jurisdictions, they do provide seats for people to sit down and wait for buses. But you see, Mr. Chairman, for the MTR, they took away the seats and just provided a panel, a slanting panel for people to lean on. So no provision for seats, right? Well, the chief engineer may tell us that this is a kind of impression drawing only. In fact, in the past, the LegCo did have rounds of exchanges with the bus companies on bus interchange stations or bus transfer stations. You see, in overseas jurisdictions, there's air conditioning, and sometimes even films are shown for the commuters. Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm only asking for seats. Well, we would like to have bus routes with a higher efficiency. Well, maybe with such a design, people won't be suffering from rain and wind. But, well, Mr. Chairman, we carried out a consultation exercise. We'll give you more information about parking spaces for bicycles. As for seats and commuters' comfort, we don't have enough space for air conditioning. Unlike overseas jurisdictions, we don't have enough space for a big common room, for example. But rest assured that we have reserved sufficient space for a number of uses. This is just an impression drawing. So when we determine the alignment and the detailed design, they will discuss with the bus operators. then we can discuss what Ms. Lau suggested just now. That is, whether or not we can provide seats such that the waiting commuters won't have a very difficult time. Well, this is a new design. You can provide seats, not just this one, but also for other bus stops. You should start to have this new concept. You see, sometimes buses don't follow the exact timetable, so the waiting commuters have a difficult time. Can the Highways Department and the Transport Department tell us more about liaising with bus operators as mentioned by the Chief Engineer? Mr. Poon Chee Man. Mr. Chairman, there are 3 bus routes, 1 by KMB and 2 by MTR will be placed here. When we do the detailed design, we'll discuss with the Housing Department and other relevant departments to see whether the facilities suggested by members can be included. So you talk to the bus operators. Mr. Leung Yiu Chung, Mr. Chairman, I don't know the position of the Transport Department at the moment. In many jurisdictions, they already pay attention to environment and pollution, so they encourage their people to use bicycles. For example, in Taiwan and Japan, at bus transfer stations, you usually see a lot of bicycle parking spaces. So I really don't understand why only 30 will be provided here. We're told that in the vicinity that there are a few hundred bicycle parking spaces in the vicinity. Then you don't need these 30. 30 is neither here nor there. Why 30? Under what principles did you consider that 30 would be enough? Why not 40? Why? In other jurisdictions, I observed that they have double-decker bicycle parking facilities. So I'd like to know, under what principles did you consider 30 to be enough? 4 bus routes? 2 or 3? 3. All right, 3 bus routes. Will that be enough? I understand that in that area, the residents would like to have more bus routes plying within the district itself, because in Hong Shui Kiu, 100,000 jobs approximately would be provided, and opportunities will grow for cross-district jobs. So will 3 bus routes be enough? All right. You have buses. What about minibuses? How many minibus routes will you accommodate in this PTI? Well, usually by the side of a bus stop or bus terminus, you have a minibus terminus or minibus stop. So how many minibus routes? You are only proposing 1 level. That's rather pitiful. You should provide more, because in rural areas, eateries have always been a problem. Will services be enough? So please tell us the criteria in question. Why do you think that this level of provision will be enough? Chief Engineer, cycle tracks, bicycle parking spaces, etc. Well, I'll defer to the Transport Department. All right. Principal Transport Officer. Thank you, Chairman. Let me say something about the arrangement in Tin Shui Wai. At the moment, in Tin Shui Wai, we have the West Rail Tin Shui Wai station. In the vicinity, we have a Tin Shui Wai light rail station. With this Tin Shui Wai bus terminus, we'll get this PTI. Members asked about the future development. Well, there's this light rail network. We can make use of the light rail network to provide feeder services. In this bus terminus, there are 4 lanes. There are double width lanes. So if needed, we can accommodate 8 bus routes in total. We'll consider the services and developments in the vicinity to add new bus routes here. As for cycle tracks, perhaps later I can provide the details about the parking spaces. Originally, this was a bus stop, so we planned for bicycle parking spaces in accordance with the area. In fact, in Tin Shui Wai, there are already parking spaces for bicycles. Mr. Alice Mark, Mr. Chairman, number 1, during the construction phase, traffic arrangements will be made. For example, K76 will have its bus stops relocated. I think you should talk to the district councillors and the local residents. The residents should not be affected during the construction stage because some bus stops have already been relocated. The paper tells us that in 2013, you conducted 2 rounds of consultation with the district council, which would like to have a market and a cooked food center. The chief engineer mentioned a wet market. In the course of design, after listening to the district council, what modifications would you effect? Now, you have met with the district council twice. To what extent have you absorbed their opinion? At the last meeting, a few months ago, when we discussed this in LegCo, we also presented you with some views. But this time when you come again, apparently you have not changed the proposed facilities to a great extent. I think you should talk to the district council at an early stage to absorb their views. It seems that now you want funding from us, so you come to discuss with us, and now you tell us that this and that cannot be done. Who will answer this? Mr. Low, Chief Engineer. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Mack. In fact, during the planning and conceptual stage, we already do consultation. Just now, Mr. Wong, the chief architect, already mentioned that we went to the district council twice to listen to their views. After listening to their views in terms of planning and design, we would like to have their consent before we come to LegCo. That's about consultation. The other point is about the wet market and other shops. We would like to entertain the request of the district council, and we've put those proposed facilities in the HOS development, not in this public works projects. That's why they are not included in the paper. During the construction stage, road diversion or realignment or traffic diversion, etc., will be discussed among the transport department, the housing department, or even the police. If any changes are to affect the residents and road users, will conduct appropriate consultation. Mr. Mack, What about case 76? Any arrangements on the part of the Transport Department so as not to inconvenience the public? Who will answer this? Mr. Maximan from the Transport Department. Concerning the 3 bus routes, the Housing Department has to carry out preparation work at this PTI. We did liaise with the district councillors of the constituency concerned. For K76, it is a very busy route in the evening, so we have reserved sufficient space for commuters to queue up. Undeniably, the relocation will move the original bus stops 50 to 80 meters further down. But this is to accommodate the works required. So this change was effected in accordance with the needs on various sides or aspects.
Next, Mr. Wong Kwok Hing. I would like to ask a question about the roadside laybys of the bus terminus. Will there be dropped curbs to make it convenient for the wheelchair persons? Have you considered that in your design? Second, in the bus terminus, have you provided for space or facility for the bus drivers to take a rest? At the discussions at the transport panel, we're very concerned about the breaks taken by the bus drivers. Are there toilets and other facilities? Well, for some PTI bus terminus, these facilities are located far away from the PTI, and the bus drivers have to walk quite a distance for the toilet. And for some of the PTIs, temporary or provisional toilets are provided, and this is undesirable. Since we are building a new bus terminus, have you considered this point? Mr. Law. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wong. There will be dropped curbs for wheelchair users. There are 4 roadside laybys, and at the edges of these laybys, dropped curbs will be provided to make them barrier-free. And also toilet, restroom for the bus terminus. Perhaps I'll defer to the colleague from the TD to answer. Thank you. For the new bus terminus, in our planning stage, we would liaise with the bus companies, and they will make an application for such facilities. Bus companies are normally allowed to provide for a rest area or even lockers, and there is a shopping center nearby. Bus companies, my guess is that they would not be providing for toilets because they have to do with operating expenses and also hygiene issues. The bus drivers' representatives have also given the bus company their views. If the bus company ultimately designs to provide for a a toilet, then we will work with them and make such provision. I think the TD is playing a passive role here. And this is exactly the point of criticism by the labor unions. You said you are going to wait for the bus company to make an application. Why can't the TD ask the planning department to have such a design on the hardware? And then if you are waiting for the bus company to apply, isn't it too passive? Thank you, Mr. Wong, for your question. We would not normally provide toilets for the bus company staff or bus drivers. If we are to provide for one, then it will be a public toilet, and not just for the bus drivers. As I said, there are public toilet facilities nearby, so it may not be necessary to provide for a separate one at the PTI for the bus drivers. If the bus company makes an inspection of the site and believes that the toilets nearby are not suitable for their use, then they will be building a toilet themselves as part of their facilities for the bus captains, just like the rest areas and lockers for bus captains. Ms. Chen Yunhan, there have been views in the community that the government may disregard views from the community, and the community believes that an extra floor can be provided above the PTI to provide a wet market, stores, and so on. And the government said that another wet market will be provided within the HOS. I think this is a good compromise. Now, if more space can be provided, why don't you make use of this space? Hong Kong's economy is not faring too well recently, and there has been an incident recently with a hawker who has difficulties in making a living. He has been arrested for 2 times. So if we have a space for people to sell goods, and a lot of people will make use of this space. For myself, I organized recently a sort of mini bazaar in a certain space, in a space beneath the flyover. Once the project is announced, dozens of store operators would like to make use of the space, and they come forward. I visited areas near MTR stations in the NT, and a lot of young people are putting up stores to sell the goods. And they said that they have an ordinary job, and it's just that on weekends they would like to sell goods, sometimes made by themselves. So there is a great wealth gap in Hong Kong, and why don't we do more to help the poor? If we have the space, allow people to sell goods. You are not doing it. Is it because the works is not within your portfolio, or that such an idea comes within the ambit of Kuwingman? With regard to retail facilities and wet market, actually we've discussed all these with the district council, and we reached a consensus, and we decided to put the facilities within the HOS development. Ms. Chan said that DZ's views have not been incorporated. So this is what she is asking. Housing Department, Mr. Wong. Chief Architect, Mr. Wong Mung Wen. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Chan, for your question. We went to the District Council, and to our understanding, they would like to have a cooked foods center and also a wet market within the site. Originally, we didn't have that plan, And now, after the consultation, we will provide for a wet market. As for the Kut Fook Center, we do have a shopping center which has eateries, fast food shops, and also bakeries. So we have responded already to the DC's request. Well, I know all these, but my question is, with regard to public works projects, especially for public works projects of a larger scale, you can maximize the use of the space. Well, you can make better use of the areas near the MTR stations. People should be allowed to sell wet goods or dry goods or whatever. Well, where does the problem lie? Is it the fact that the Going-man's bureau doesn't agree to the proposal? So what I meant is that there are some sort of mini bazaars around areas near MTR stations. So I'm asking you, is it the case that this doesn't fall under your portfolio, or do you have to seek help from other bureaus? I would be asking the same question time and again. Can you make better use of the space in development projects? Have you ever considered my idea? If you said that you have never thought about it, well, that may be one answer. And then you may say that you have thought about this. It's just that it's not within your portfolio. So that is another answer that you can give me. Mr. Wong, I don't believe that the district council has directly made the same request you made. They are just asking for a wet market and also a cooked food center for HOS development. Then the HOS will in future be managed by the small owners, and they may not like the idea of stalls at the roadside. Well, I know what you said. My question is, if you agree that space is limited in Hong Kong and you should be helping people to sell goods on the roadside, you can ask your ADA, your assistant director in Tam Kwang Village. They have increased the number of stores from 1,000 to several thousand. And she has agreed that at the space beneath the HOS development, space will be allotted for use by the artists for selling their artworks. So I think they've adopted a good and innovative approach. All the time we said that there isn't insufficient space. Why don't we consider this when we're developing this project? And also we have to be concerned about the noise nuisance, possible noise nuisance. We have to be forward-looking. And it's no good that we proceed with what we are planning and then deal with the complaints afterwards. These are long-standing problems. So if you can't give me an answer today, then that's all right with me. But then, whenever projects like this come before us, I will ask these same questions. I'd appreciate your Assistant Director, Ada Fong, who is very forward-looking. So the Deputy Secretary for Development, please take my views back to the Development Bureau, especially for remote areas in the NT. The residents have a lot of demands. Well, allow them to do selling goods on the roadside, having stalls put up at the roadside, and so on. I would like to remind the officials, please pay attention to what has been discussed in the Hawker Policy Subcommittee at the panel. Dr. Going-man has come up with this new direction. They would like to adopt a district-based approach, and the government will be sort of facilitator, and they would adopt a bottoms-up approach. As what Mr. Chan said, we would be allowing small businesses, small stores to operate within the districts, and space should be provided for these small store operators to operate. Second round. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, Tony Chair, Leung Yiu-chung, Albert Chan. That's your order. First, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Cycle parking area, 30 spaces, and just $3.1 million. I mean, it's very costly.
Would you please elaborate? Because for one bicycle, you only need one bollard plus one chain, maybe. So can you reserve space for future expansion? In future, if you need more parking spaces for bicycles, you have the space to do so. And just now, the Transport Panel passed a motion on Ho Chung in the New Territories. $298 million for a flyover. But now, for this footbridge, we're talking about $256 million. Is my understanding correct? The loading and design for a footbridge are more or less the same as those for a vehicular flyover, such that the cost is so high. Concerning cycle tracks, a lot of questions have been asked already. Can you say something about the cost of the footbridge as well? Who will answer this? Mr. Chairman, for the cost of the parking spaces for the bicycles, I would defer to the Transport Department or the Highways Department. Well, this footbridge will be 140 meters long. It will cross Pingha Road, which is a very wide trunk road. It's a dual carriageway with a central divider, and the main span of the footbridge is 65 meters long, so the construction cost will be high. It's 5 meters wide, such that pedestrians will have sufficient space for a comfortable walk. The unit cost is $1.8 million per square meters. In Po Yap Street in Chang Kwan O, recently we had a similar footbridge. The unit cost was $1.9 million per square meter. So the construction cost is more or less the same for both footbridges. Now, what about the parking spaces for bicycles? Why so costly? Well, there's room for lowering the cost. Maybe this is an overestimation. We'll go back and review the construction cost. Now, where are these parking spaces for bicycles? Will there be sufficient space for future expansion? Let me elaborate. Under the footbridge, more parking spaces for bicycles can be provided. Mr. Chairman, parking spaces for bicycles are nothing complicated. You see, at Lechko here, quite a high number of bicycles can be accommodated. If you tell me that you only plan for 30 and there's no room for future expansion, then the proposed construction cost is higher than necessary. Mr. Tony Tse, Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on my questions in the first round. Very often for footbridges, government departments will say that they'll provide the detailed design later. I'm particularly concerned about the cover of the footbridge, which is rather long. Concerning bicycles, Mr. Wu Chi-wai already made some remarks. The unit cost for the bicycle parking spaces is rather high. You're only talking about 30 spaces underneath the footbridge. I find that strange. Is it that they're going to have innovative facilities? That's why they have such a high unit cost. The government has explained these cycle parking spaces under the footbridge. But in fact, in other cities, there are more innovative designs. I wonder if the government has considered new designs. Just now the government said that it would review the construction cost. Well, if you only have a concrete surface, I wonder if you need $100,000 per space. If it's really so expensive, then I'll ask for more information. They should be more innovative. As said just now, you can have 2 levels of cycle parking spaces because supply and demand may change in future, so the government must have flexibility. Now, management is important. You spend so much money on this. If nobody is to manage the facility, then the government will be too passive. You may be spending a great deal of money without making good use of the land. $330,000 for 30 bicycle parking spaces. Or $3.1 million. Well, just now, when this question was asked, Mr. Chu Chu-leung provided an answer. Can you elaborate? Well, this is a traditional design, not an innovative design. That's why I said that we would go back and review the construction cost. Is it that if we didn't ask, then you would not review the cost? You should be responsible for your own paper. So to what extent will you review the construction cost? A reduction of 10%, 20%, or what? Any explanation for $100,000 per space? Well, we'll go back and dig out the detailed calculation. There's room for downward adjustment. All right, please do that before the Finance Committee meeting. Not just a review, you have to explain why so costly as $100,000 per space. Mr. Leung Yiu-chung, I wonder if the government should reconsider the design. The basic position is whether or not the government encourages the use of bicycles. They now plan for 3 or 4 bays for 8 bus routes. Is it that 10 people will use 1 lane? I don't think that's a proper calculation. You know that in the vicinity there will be parking spaces for bicycles, But if the bicycles are too far away from the bus terminus, it wouldn't work. Even with a downward adjustment, these parking spaces for bicycles will still be too costly. 30 is too small a number. Is it because of this small number that they're suggesting a downward adjustment? Rather than adjusting the construction costs downwards, you should provide more spaces for bicycles to park. That should be your basic position and attitude, rather than deterring people to use bicycles. So please reconsider your stance. And just now you did not answer my question about minibuses. Minibuses are a very important mode of transport in the district. In Hong Shui Kiu, 100,000 jobs will be provided. You don't just need buses and bicycles, but also minibuses for the commuters. So how many minibus routes can this PTI accommodate? Mr. Leung Yu Chung, may I remind you that just now Mr. Poon Chi Man already said that bicycle parking spaces, supply exceeds demand at the moment. So please consider how you're going to elaborate on that. Mr. Poon, bicycles first. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Leung, for your question. For bicycles, for the 3 bus routes at this bus terminus is KMP 276P and K76 and K75 operated by the MTRCL. Not many people are using bicycles, and the cyclists usually make use of the parking spaces at the West Rail Station. As our colleague said, we'll go back and see whether there's a need for an increased number of bicycle parking spaces. May I interrupt you here? In Tin Shui Wai and its vicinity, there are a lot of complaints about shortage of bicycle parking spaces. Just go to Tin Shui Wai and see how many bicycles are parking at public housing estates. And Tin Shui Wai will be further developed. You'll see more housing estates there. You can follow me to Tin Shui Wai and see how many bicycles there are. How can you say that supply exceeds demand at the moment? Mr. Poon Chi Man? Mr. Chairman, as we said just now, together with the Housing Department, we'll review this number of 30 to see whether that is sufficient and whether or not there is a need for an increase. So how will we handle this paper? Do we need to wait till you come back with answers before we process this paper? And what about the cost of $3.1 million? You have to review that as well. Well, that's not the attitude of the government. Well, but they say that they're going to review their position. Well, they can do so before the FC meeting. And if necessary, we can separate this item for the vote. Well, they must not force us to endorse the proposals in this paper today. Next, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. Mr. Chairman, as we ask our questions, we dig out more issues from the government. It's just like what's happening to the CE. Given the logic of Professor Chan Kar-kang, in future, these projects won't come to the PWSC. $100,000 per bicycle parking space in future. They will not come to us for vetting. Well, that's unreasonable, both in terms of provision and policy. Now, this HOS development will generate a great deal of new traffic. So, in general, it's logical to dismantle the old PTI and build a new one. Now you are to have four bays, and one PTI for franchised buses. Now this is where the problem lies. You have a new community here with 7,700 residents.
Do you assume that these people will walk via past the footbridge and then go to the Tinshui MTR station, and others may take buses to go to other areas? The PTI will have an impact on the neighboring areas as well. The chief engineer just said that parking spaces supply may outstrip demand. Well, tell me how come that there aren't many car parks provided in Taipo, and you told us that if we have car parks in Taipo, there will be many more people driving to Taipo, and then that would not do no good to our traffic policies. And traffic congestion may be caused, pollution may be caused. So by the same token, if you have more cycle parking areas, would you attract more cyclists to go there? If cyclists can't find a space there, then that's no good. I think there's a problem with your logic. You are proposing a huge amount of money here. You will be building a flyover or a footbridge to divert the residents to go and take MTR. Why wouldn't you like to attract cyclists to cycle there? Well, give them the opportunity to answer your question. You've got only 45 seconds left. You would like to ask the Transport Department and the Development Bureau? I think this is a development issue. So who would you like to answer your question? Well, let's not digress. CY Leung acts the same way. Mr. Poon, can you take that question? Thank you, member, for your question. Regarding the cycle parking area, let me try to put it in another way. We are prepared to go back and take a look again, and if 30 spaces are not sufficient, and we will also be looking at the number of spaces nearby, and if needed be, beneath the footbridge, there is a space which can be further expanded for that purpose. With regard to the use of the footbridge and also the use of bicycles, I believe that people will prefer to use a footbridge rather than bicycles. Third, on the management of bicycles within the area of the PTI, the Transport Department is responsible for the management. And on a regular basis, we will be clearing or removing the bicycles which have been abandoned. Outside the PTI area, different government departments are responsible for coordinating the management. So this arrangement applies to other districts as well. Now, if members don't have any further questions, I would now put the item to a vote. Those who are for the item, please raise your hand. Sorry, the speaker's not coming through. Sorry, the speaker's not coming through. The district councillors have asked that space be reserved. Sorry, Mr. Lang Yu-jong, you should be clear about this. We can ask for separate voting at the FC stage. What our guess is that it won't be put before the FC before the 8th of May, and you can ask for separate voting at the FC and to see whether your queries have been properly dealt with. And you can do whatever you like at this stage, but so far I haven't heard that the government would like to withdraw this item. So I would now like to proceed with the voting if there are no any other comments. Those who support the item, please raise your hand. Those against, please raise your hand. 1. 8-4. 1 against. I believe that the majority of members who took part in the voting support the item. So this item is endorsed. Is there any member who wishes this item to be voted on separately? Mr. Lang Kwok-hong. Yes. Please take that down. Let's move on to item 2. And that has to do with the Head 707 New Towns and Urban Area Development, 200SC Signature Project Scheme, Shamshepo District, Chak Kip Mei Community Services Center, Recreation 455 RO SPS Project 1TC District, Expansion and Improvement of Wong Tai Sin Square. And it requests the members to consider the upgrading of 200SC and 455 RO to Category A at estimated cost of $51.1 million and $31.1 million in money of the day prices, respectively. On the 23rd of July 2014 and the 12th of December, the government has consulted the Home Affairs panel, and the members don't object to the forwarding of these two items for consideration by the PWSC, and the gist of the discussion has been tabled. Those attending the meeting today for these items include those from the Home Affairs Department, the LCSD, the Housing Department, Shamshepo District Council, Wong Tai Sin District Council. First of all, I would like to ask the Ms. Charmaine Wong, Assistant Director of Home Affairs Department, to take us through the two items. Thank you, Chairman. We would like to take members through the two projects in Shamshepo and Wong Tai Sin. Members can give us support in upgrading the two projects to Category A. These are two SBS projects put forward by the two DCs after lengthy deliberations. And the two district councils unanimously supported the two projects, reflecting that these two projects meet with the needs of the districts and will bring visible and long-lasting impact to the community. And the two projects got the support from the Home Affairs panel. And the projects have been abiding by the relevant regulations, and the feasibility is affirmed. The first project is the community centers and halls in Shamshepo, Chak Kip Mei Community Services Center in Shamshepo. The Polangkong will provide 3 core services. One is childcare and after-school care support services, short-term food assistance, and medical services. It can benefit many grassroots families and disadvantaged groups in the community. It is within the housing authority space outside Mayhaw House, and the HA plans to develop Chak Kip Mei Estate Phase 3, and after approval from the FC, we would entrust the HA to build this community center. It includes the building of a 706 square meters center at the podium. It has all sorts of facilities, and the money of the day prices. The estimated cost is $51.1 million. The second project is expansion and improvement of Wong Tai Sin Square. This is one of the SBS in Wong Tai Sin. The space of the square will be expanded by 40% to 4,650 square meters, and will make it the space more suitable for holding different activities. And the organizers of various activities would not have to put up ad hoc stage and cover every time when events are hosted, saving on costs, and they don't need long-term planning because of this. And many more organizations can rent this space to host different events. The estimated costs is $31.1 million in money of the day prices. So much for my briefing. Before I ask members to raise questions, I would particularly like to welcome the District Council Chairman, Mr. Jimmy Kwok, Chairman of Shamshepo District Council, Mr. Lee Tak-hon, Chairman of Wong Tai Sin Council, and Mr. Wong Kam-chiu, Vice Chairman of Wong Tai Sin District Council. So, members, you can now ask questions. Those who would like to ask questions, please raise your hand. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. In the layout plan of the Shak Hip Mei Community Service Center, there is an area marked short-term food assistance and also a food store. I think this is an initiative we support. And for the food storage area, there may be some hygiene issues involved. For this food storeroom, can the District Council Chairman brief us on what the considerations are? Are there any measures to ensure the hygiene condition of the area so that the high-quality food assistance service can be provided? Thank you. Mr. Kwok. This area will not store a huge amount of food. Food may be taken from outside canteens elsewhere and taken here to be provided to residents. And perhaps a DO, Mr. Mok, can elaborate. Thank you, Dr. Low, for your question. For our short-term food assistance scheme, we would like to apply for a food manufacturing license to provide hot food to those who need in the community at a very low price, around $10 to $12 a meal for those who need. And the food storeroom will accommodate canned foods, dried food. For hot food supplied, that food storeroom can help out a bit. The DO said that you will need a license for a food factory, right? Yes. Well, Chairman, I don't have any further question. I support this proposal. Next one, Ms. Chen Yun Han. Thank you, Chairman. We support the two proposals from these two districts. First, on the Wong Tai Sin project, the Wong Tai Sin District Council is very concerned, and they asked me whether this item will be tabled and put forward. And I'm very happy that we are discussing this today. And we've been aspiring for this project for a long time. We hope that it can be endorsed ASAP. I've been taking part in the design of this Wong Tai Sin Square expansion project. We hope that the project can be endorsed ASAP. I have some questions. The Wong Tai Sin district is very concerned about how to make the best use of our limited space. I hope that we can consider suggestions made earlier by the DC. We've got a huge patronage footfall. How can we do a good job in management? We cannot have too much control and neither too little control. So I'm concerned whether LCSD will impose a lot of restrictions in the future. This is an area which has been used in the past for a bazaar, and a lot of people have hoped that they could be given some space to sell goods, do some small businesses. And I'm worried that different departments will impose various restrictions. So I want to be very clear about my request. Please allocate a space for the small businesses within the scale. So overall, I hope that the proposal can be endorsed today. So I have spoken on behalf of the District Council to express their views, how to make the best use of the space here.
Who would you like to answer your question? Maybe the LCSD? The LCSD is here. The Assistant Director is here. Ms. Li Lai Fan. That is Ms. Margaret Lee, the Assistant Director, LCSD. Would you please answer Ms. Chen Yunhan's question? We're very concerned about this. After the project is completed, the usage rate as well as pedestrian flow will increase. In terms of security, will enhance manpower. When activities or performances are on, and if members of the public have to go back to the bus stop, will ensure that corridors are free from obstruction. And premises hired can be put to good use. I hope that the LCSD can heed our advice. We're in the district for a long, long time. We have to listen to your views at the same time. Don't tell us that there'll be a lot of restrictions. Otherwise, the cultural organizations will consider that you are blocking their development. And then next, can you plan for some hawkers' stores? LCSC, Ms. Margaret Lee. Well, Mr. Chairman, normally we won't allow hawkers there. Well, of course, Mr. Chairman, they'll say that nothing can be done. Not even a bottle of water can be bought. You can only buy a bottle of water in the shopping mall. I'm asking for some space for hawkers. Well, there are some food items that are very much characteristic of Hong Kong, and the government is telling us that nothing can be accommodated. Well, Mr. Chairman, the LCSD always says that it doesn't want any disturbance. They just want to work comfortably. Well, I'm asking whether you can allow for certain hawking activities. Well, if the program, I understand. I'm asking for planning. Can you plan for a standing hawker's bazaar, for example? If an elderly man would like to buy a bottle of water, there's nowhere he can go. Well, Mr. Chairman, that's my constituency. I'm from the District Council. The elderly people told me that they couldn't even buy a bottle of water. That's why I said we have to have your management, but we cannot allow you to do whatever you want. Well, even for the last item on the agenda, were discussing the same issues. I think you've heard that Dr. Koh Wing-man in our subcommittee on hawkers said that the government was actively considering certain policies on hawkers. He mentioned bottom-up approaches for hawkers and bazaars. He said that the government would change its role from a regulator to a facilitator. I think you've also heard that idea from Dr. Koh. Now, that approach received general support in the subcommittee. As Dr. Koh has already mapped out the broad direction, the district councils and the district officers should cope. But for the LCSD, policy-wise, that may be difficult at the moment. Ms. Chen Yunhan, well, Mr. Chairman, we now have this new policy from the government. This policy emerged 1 odd month ago. We just had a recent tragedy. This hawker had been caught twice already, and we had this tragedy. We had successful examples previously. I'm only asking you for a site for the sale of small handicraft items. If you don't allow that, what will happen? Our chairman already mentioned this new policy from the government. Mr. Chairman, after they have obtained our approval, they won't do anything further. Government departments are working independently. They disregard this new policy. So under the new policy, why can't they think of something new? District officer, we understand the issue very well. We understand the policy. It is you who don't understand what's happening. So we want a site for the hawkers. Well, Ms. Lee, a brief reply, please. I'd like to thank Ms. Chan for her comments. I'll discuss with the District Council to see how we can take this up. Mr. Leong Kwok Hong. Mr. Chairman, some people say that LegCo is not a place for politics, but for work. Frankly speaking, if Mr. Tong Chi Wah did not abolish the 2 municipal councils, then today we don't need the district council chairman today at this meeting. They can just run for seats in the municipal councils. You see, many of us here supported the abolition of the municipal councils. Previously, the municipal councils had real power. Now, district councils don't have real power. That's why Ms. Chen Yunhan was scolding the government. Dr. Koh Wing-man is just like the iCloud. He doesn't know what's happening. Hong Kong is a metropolis, a very crowded metropolis. $100 million for each district council. But, as Ms. Chen Yunhan said, the district councils have no real powers. Let me ask the 2 DC chairmen, do you have real power? No. Well, this is the result of your previous wrong decision. At the beginning, they said that power would be given to the district councils. But that did not come true. And now, the first of these 3 projects is the Shek Kip Mei project. We're told that although the project is a small one, everything will be accommodated. But what I would like to say is that prima facie, everything is included, but in actual fact, nothing is really useful enough. Look at this facility that you are proposing. Roughly speaking, a lot will be provided, but honestly speaking, at the community level, you should enhance the provision for the elderly. You want elderly to age in place, but the burden, the buck is passed to the local community. In Sham Shui Po district, we have the highest number of poor and aged persons. When the old estates were redeveloped, we mentioned the elderly people who used to sit on the benches. They are suffering from strong sunlight, strong wind, and heavy downpour. So, honestly speaking, if we're not saying all these when the government comes for funding, the government officials won't listen to us. The pro-establishment members blame us for repeating the same issues. But we have to do this because if we don't say these, nobody will know the problems. So what about this small facility? Will it be like a small hamburger? You try to squeeze everything in, but what about the old and aged persons? Well, before we continue, I'd like to consult you on our meeting time. Originally, we should finish at 10:30 a.m., but we will have the electrical meeting at 11 a.m. Now, I think if we extend our meeting to 10:45, there's a chance for us to complete this item. So I will extend the meeting to 10:45. Which official will answer Mr. Leung Kwok-hong's question? Sham Shui Po District Officer. All right, Mr. Benjamin Mok, Sham Shui Po District Officer. As Mr. Leung said, when we planned this project, we considered the characteristics of Sham Shui Po. We have a lot of grassroots residents. Let me say something particularly about food assistance. Some of our Kaifongs have family difficulties which cannot be resolved immediately. So we would like this to help them. As for medical and health care services, Chinese medicine practitioners, Western medicine practitioners, massage and manipulation services, etc. will be provided. Many elderly persons would like to have medical and health care services, even on Saturdays and Sundays. Dental services as well. We heard that elderly residents would like to have dental services. So the area is not big, but we would like to cover a lot of services. For the elderly and CSSA recipients, they can ask for fee reduction, and sometimes services can be provided free of charge. And the elderly residents can use their healthcare vouchers. So we would like to meet the aspirations of the residents. What about barrier-free access? the connectivity project proposed by CY Leung, any provision, well, this center will definitely be barrier-free. There's a podium leading to the center. This is by the side of Phase 3 of the redeveloped Shek Kip Mei estate. Mr. Frederick Fung, well, Mr. Chairman, I support the Shek Kip Mei project. During the consultation period, the government was continuously changing suggestions from the Sham Shui Po District Council. So you got a lot of suggestions from the district councillors. The hardware proposed is okay, but an AGO is to run the center, and some services will be provided free of charge or at a reduced fee. So how will this be sustainable? Well, after 3 years, can the NGO still balance its books? If not, will certain services become more expensive? If they provide cheap or low-cost services, they may not balance their books. May I know more about the fee structure? I hope they're not charging like the private practitioners. Who will answer this? District Officer. Yes, Mr. Benjamin Mock.
Thank you, Mr. Fung, for your question. With regard to the operation of the center, it is important that it is sustainable. If an NGO is to run the center, in our case it's Po Leung Kok, how can we ensure that it can operate continuously? The center is providing services to the grassroots, and relatively speaking, more funds are needed. And we've asked the NGO to be self-financed, and the board of directors of Po Leung Kok has agreed that if deficits are incurred, then reserve will be made use of to subsidize the continuous operation of the center, and fundraising may also be done. So that is written in black and white in their application documents. With regard to the fees, there are a number of considerations. As what Mr. Fung said, in the district, the residents' affordability is a factor. So in the last time, there is a fee reduction mechanism. Let me cite an example. For general medicine, the fee will be charged. The fee will be around $60 odd. For those in particular difficulties, further reduction can be made. And also fee reduction can apply to those aged over 65, those on CSSA, and those on textbook subsidy. For dental services, tooth scaling, around $100 only. So we hope to meet with the needs of the grassroots. He hasn't answered my question. Well, if you have fee reduction, then the center may not be sustainable financially. And if you charge a high fee, then that may not be affordable to the users. So how can you deal with these the conflicts here? When the various NGOs made an application to operate the center, the applicants have envisaged that deficits may be incurred. And for the SBS, there is a start-up subsidy around 5% in the first 2 years, and in this case, around $200 million to help out with the operator. And thereafter, the Po Leung Kok has undertaken that even if a deficit is incurred, they would be subsidizing the operation through their internal deployment and through fundraising. We have confidence in Po Leung Kok. It is a sizable NGO with a long history, and they have a wealth of experience in running such operations. So I believe that they can fulfill the needs of the grassroots and then operate the center sustainably too. Dr. Lo Wai Kok, I support the Sham Shui Po program and also support the Wong Tai Sin program. And I think this is a good initiative to build a performance stage with cover in the square. And there is a big need for such a performance stage facility. And if we put up in an ad hoc stage every time, then it's a waste of money and it's not the safest option. To build a cover for the spectator area, I also support that. But I think you should pay attention to the design. There will be a tensile fabric cover with regard to the artist's impression and also the location plan. Well, in the event that there is a rain, then water may fall through the cover. So I think the design should be improved upon so that won't happen. I have reservations on the present design. It's not difficult to make refinements. I think we should be very careful. Or else, when there is rainfall, then spectators may still be exposed to the rain. And I think the government should pay attention to this. Mr. Lee Tak-hong, chairman of the Wong Tai Sin DC, have you thought about this? And in terms of the design, have you considered that as well? Mr. Lee, you would like to take that question, right? Thank you, Dr. Low, for your question. I think the issue has been fully dealt with at DC meetings. We have tried to resolve that issue, and there is a rainfall collection device to be built in. I would just like to bring you to the attention of this possible problem. So if you have a rainwater collection device, then that would be good. If the spectator area and the cover of the stage can be linked together, then that would be best. But if they have already considered this, then it's all right, acceptable to me. Is it going to be a sort of retractable type of design? No, it's just a design. It's not retractable. So if you have a device for collecting the rainwater, then that's all right. So any further question from members? If members don't have any questions, then I would put the item to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your hand. Those against, raise your hand. I believe that those who take part in the voting are all for the item. So the items are endorsed. I don't think that there is a request for separate voting on this item, right? So we believe that the two items discussed today will be forwarded to the FC on the 8th of May. There will be separate voting on the PTI. No AOB. Thank you very much.